a cost on that. So that's obviously a lot less. There was something that they ran into as they got more into it. It's that there are those transformers back there, and I think that got communicated. It was unanticipated. We're going to have to move the utility poles and electric relocation. That coupled with has it pretty much in line with what was originally supplemented. That's where we left that. The follow-up to that was, does it make sense to go ahead and finish off the space? Instead of having phase 2, phase 3, who knows how many phases, what would it take to go in and finish that second floor over there at the annex? Also do the renovations to City Hall that have been talked about, including safety, security issues, and a couple other shifting around the offices to accommodate, planning department moves over there. And so that's listed here, really 2 categories. The first one says City Hall Annex, which is the Gazette building, to renovate, including furniture and fixtures. It's $200,000 estimate. To abate the asbestos, T on there. Asbestos is estimated at $31,000. For City Hall, for renovation and security alterations, I got the ground floor. This is just the way Jackie broke it down. First floor, second floor, architectural fees, $218,000 various times. But this is the latest, greatest number that I have from her. And then City Council talked at the previous council meeting about the engineering building and what is the possibility. I know we looked into selling it and what it might be worth or renting it out. The problem, parking's still an issue, and you can't hardly rent a building to somebody with no parking. But we don't have real firm numbers, but what we did lay out here is if we were to go in and demo the house, construct the parking lot, based a version somewhat with what council talked about, where there's maybe some park benches, or so that it softened the look as you came into town. So incorporating some aesthetic elements to it, not just a parking lot. Perhaps, and again, restrooms, maybe a small shelter, not like a shelter house, maybe just a little gazebo or some place if you had to, you could get out of the rain. But more of it, and it's not a gathering place where people are going to have events, but more so just a place where you could sit and watch the, whatever traffic go by, a little bit more aesthetics, lighting, landscaping, contingency. We've got to figure $328,000. So in total, including all the improvements that we're going to have to pay for one way or another, $2.578 million. So where does that come from? So if you flip to the next page, the first legal size page, up there at the top, I've got that number, $2.568 million total improvement costs. We do have money in the fund balance of our municipal improvement, our municipal impact fee fund. Again, that money can only be spent on expanding our capacity for buildings, capacity. And 500 is about the most. There's about 600 and some $1,000 in there. We do have outstanding debt that we're paying on for a few more years for the Justice Center improvements made several years ago in the Public Works facility. So I wanted to make sure I didn't tap into all of those funds, but I think $500,000 is a safe amount. So if we use those funds, that brings down the amount to be financed a little over $2 million. Below this now, I'm kind of showing a cash flow issue over several years. We do have some revenue streams coming in. So the first line is the Cohatch rent. That's part of our agreement with them. They're going to pay $6,500 a month for the first 10 years, and then a little bit more than that for if they renew. Now, obviously, this is contingent on them continuing to rent out, but I think that's a pretty good rent charge. So I'm reasonably confident, even if they did leave at some point, we could get somebody back in there. The municipal impact fees, again, I went in and I looked at, on average, what we've been collecting annually, and again, that goes up and down with development levels. So I went back far enough to get back into the 2008, 2009, 2010, when we weren't doing a whole lot. Kind of averaged that over that time period, and then I looked at, and it's more than this. We do have $119,000 that we pay in debt service for the Justice Center and that. So I subtracted that. This is a conservative residual amount. So basically $35,000 a year. Now, that's going to pretty much tap our municipal impact fees, but I think if we make all these improvements, I think we're in a pretty good shape as far as facility-wise. I'm not sure that we necessarily, I don't know for foreseeable future that we really need any more space improvements. So there's a revenue stream, $113,000 for the first 10 years. The debt service on that $2 million is about $172,000 a year for 15 years. The difference between the two, 59,285 is what we would need to somehow fund. Now, that 59,285 is really two component parts. I broke it down below. The co-hatch part is you're already committed to, because that's part of the 1.18 million, even if we do nothing more than what we originally intended. So the incremental amount is about $38,500. And again, this spreads it over a 15-year period. So that's what the cash flow would look like. Now, if we flip to the next page, kind of wanted to incorporate this into how could we accomplish this with the least impact on other issues. So there's a couple other things that are at play. What I've done here is on the top half here, this is our existing capital plan, 2018 to 2022. Just the top part, the part that shows what we're allocating out of the income tax, and then the existing debt service. And the existing debt service is, I might note, the 2012 streetscape. I had shared at one point in time when we were talking about the parking garage. That might be another issue at some point we're going to talk about. And I shared with Tom, this notion of building a parking garage. I said, well, 20 years ago or so, we put, actually it was more than 2.5 million. That's just what we borrowed. I think it was $3.6 million initially in improvements between the downtown streetscape and the east side. And we did that. There was no revenue stream to offset that. We were paying almost $300,000 a year in debt service for the last 15 years or more. And then the other outstanding debt is South Houck Road, the intersection at Central and Houck. We borrowed money several years ago. Both of those borrowings, the 2022 is the last year, and that'll be paid off. So what I've done on the bottom half of the page is I took the same information, but I added a couple things. On the revenue side up there, I've got something listed, and I'll talk about that. But under expenditures, you can see in red, I've got 2018 City Hall Annex improvements. So that 59,000 from the previous page, 285. If we pay that for 15 years, that's what that's going to look like. The other thing to kind of soften the blow, I thought this was one of those opportunities too. We could use our general reserve fund, and because that debt doesn't roll off until 2022, and if we start these improvements now, we're going to be paying debt service in 2019. So what I did is that if we tapped into that reserve, 59,285 a year, and that's under revenues in blue for the first 4 years, and we use that to make the debt service the first 4 years, and then come out here in year 2023, when that other debt rolls off, we'll pay back that general fund reserve over the next 4 years, but we'll still be in a position. Obviously, there's going to be, when that debt is expired, the existing debt, we can utilize it for other things. But doing it this way doesn't impact any of our existing projects that are out there. We can do it. We can spread it out over time. I just think there's a lot of advantages to not necessarily coming back and doing the next phase and whatever else. We pretty much have it dealt with. Not just the parking lot and the potential for making a downtown improvement, parking and otherwise, cleaning up the area. I think it ultimately could, when all said and done, I think it'd be a pretty good attribute. The numbers in our budget aren't that substantial. $59,000 isn't a huge number. And I think there's a way of accomplishing that it really doesn't. I mean, it's still, you could always use that for something else, so there's no doubt about that. But this kind of provides a means to look at it and say, how can we accomplish this and not really have that big of an impact on our operations or capital plans or other matters.
It's a good plan.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's well done. The question is, in order to do that general fund reserve, is there special legislation we have to do with that, or?
We probably will or can. We'll see how, as we get to that point, it would probably be done as part of the annual budget adoption process. We would budget to make that transfer, because we would know if we do these improvements, especially if we get started before the end of the year, by the end of the year before we adopt the 2019 budget, we should have a pretty good idea what's involved. The debt, $2 million, we won't actually issue that until next year when we have our other debt rolling, because that makes sense to do it in those terms. The numbers are still estimates. I know I mentioned to Tom that even like parking lot I wanted to give you a little bit of a basis to say, okay, what if the numbers come in higher? There are some contingencies built in here, but I did do a calculation. Let's just assume it cost us $100,000 more. That would be about $8,300 additional per year for 15 years. So 200,000, 16,000, you're not talking about huge sums of money. And I think it's not going to be that much different.
I mean, I'm really impressed. I think it's well thought through and well done. I mean,
Well, I think that one of the things that got us started thinking about this, obviously, conversation with George about thinking about the whole campus, as this is a campus with City Hall being kind of the anchor as the campus, but you also have the engineering building that's part of that, and the need to address the engineering building. We kind of put that on hold after the presentation of the Historic Preservation Commission. We withdrew that, so it's not, we didn't ask them to take action, so we'd have to come back to them, and I think we want to do that, but I was concerned about building a walkway for office improvements and still having that hanging over us, the engineering building. And so I think if you can comprehensively address it and financially it's manageable, and seeing, I think it is manageable.
absolutely.
We get municipal parking, plus you're able to, for the first time in over 25 years, address space issues here at City Hall. I mean, this has served.
Pretty nice
Yeah, they get
amenity
Well, they get
with the restroom, you know.
Yeah,
all that.
they're gonna get more
Just
parking,
really
that
Spruce
amenity.
it up.
Plus, I think you're getting a more professional looking, presentable, secure office space.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's,
And it makes sense to do it all now.
I agree.
Right, you can tie it all together and not just mishmash. And,
Right.
you know, at the end of the day, money's money, you know, really compared to what we spend, even what we spend on public works building, you know, left and right on refuse, you know, it's in the grander schemes of things, it's still a pretty conservative, low-cost approach, but I think it'll end up, we'll have something, we'll be done with it we don't have to work, you know, that have to be a part of, future discussions. And
so the next step, if you're interested would be, we would propose some legislation that would come before you to start the reading process, and then you could report at the next city council meeting as the finance committee. If you were able to vote today to support in concept what you're looking at, we're not,
Right.
approving the numbers.
Mhm.
The numbers
yeah, what we would present
improvements.
would be a supplemental appropriation, because that way we'd get our budgets aligned, and a part of that, whether you go to 3 readings or whatever else, would be at some point we'd present what it is that's intended to be done, and whether we need to get back into the minutia of it or not, it's not that, I mean, it's fairly straightforward to follow, I guess, but at least then we get it out there and we can have the dialogue.
Now, does this, on the second floor annex updates, just one thing that I don't see listed out here on that was, you talked about making that exterior a secure to the second floor only.
Yeah, we're
Is that included?
We're
in
still
this,
trying to figure
or-
out, I think Dave would prefer to have the main entry to the second floor of that annex through this building.
So still have everybody coming up here and then going.
You come to
across?
City Hall, you have to come up here anyway to the second floor to get to the building office, not to the building officials.
Right.
Now you're gonna come up to the second floor and walk across to
Okay.
the new entrance. What I've talked to Dave about, and Jackie, is can we still have an access from the ground level of that second?
For the employees and stuff.
Well, for employees, but also could we, building security standpoint.
See, I think I'd rather see them have to come up.
You would?
I would just.
That's
because-
what,
From a security
What-
standpoint, I would do, but having that exit for employees and
Yeah.
as an exit would make some sense.
yeah.
Yeah, just for security reasons. That way there's eyes on who's coming in,
Well, that's what Dave was thinking, is it's still one, you're funneling them through City Hall. I was thinking if you were over there for some reason and you wanted to get to the second floor, do you have to come over to City Hall to get there? And that's,
And
I mean, not gonna be there.
wasn't there what was a statement made when we discussed this before with regards to the potential for, isn't it the planning and permitting and all that, isn't that where we said there was a more of a potential for issues
Yes,
with
and I'll tell you
conflict?
right now that this current setup is not real, it's not ideal. It's not ideal.
But I mean, is that,
And that
is
would
that really
improve-
more, yeah, but if you're still having all these people then coming up and going through here, is that, although it's maybe a single point of entry, but is that really better from a security standpoint if they have a bunch of live wires coming up the steps and then traipsing through all this? Because I don't know, outside of probably the security you have, I don't know what else your security enhancements would be up here on the second floor, but I just don't know. I mean,
I think we could answer that, George.
yeah.
I mean, those are
We can answer
details that
that.
kind of work out.
I think we can work on that.
There's obviously two sets of steps. One here in the alleyway that you go in this side door, you can get up to the second floor. Then in the front, you can get to the second floor.
Well, yeah,
If that could take you to the same place, then potentially you could have the public come through that, if they're ending up in the same place. But
The other side of it is depending on what or who parks in this parking lot that we may be creating. I don't know, if someone were here wanting to get a permit to build a deck. If they park there, yeah, it'd be nice to go up. Otherwise, I guess they'd park here like they would now and come up that way. But I think part of it was to do it in such a way that it doesn't spill over to the co-hatch space.
Right.
Was one of those things going to add to the price. And we're trying to be as frugal as we possibly can. And that was one of those things.
Are we hiring somebody, a professional that's helping us with our security?
Well, that would be why we've added some architectural fees in there.
I'm thinking you get them with Dave and just say, here's our goals and what's their
Right.
goals, and come up with what's the right
Right.
approach for that.
Because right now, these are estimates based upon Jackie and Jerry doing that. And yes, that would include hiring a professional to come in and say this.
We have had different departments, including Public Works, they take care of the buildings. We've had several meetings with different people. We have had our police department and I believe the Army
It was a federal agency that
agency
came in. as a-
came in. And again, they basically
security
said you need
analysis.
to control your access points and different things like that, but the devil's in the details. It still has to function as a city hall. And as I shared, what are you securing for? Somebody coming in to shoot up the building, people to come in and break in and get into a space where they shouldn't be. There's different types of things.
Mhm.
And I think we will need somebody to come in and provide some input as far as how best to approach that. Hopefully it's a matter of moving a wall or two and we're not into any major issues, but
So in regard to the parking,
We've got another detail we've got to work through. My objective would be, at the very least, after 5 and on the weekends, it's available to the public. So if that means having to shuttle some of our municipal vehicles that are using that to another location, that's what we're going to do. Because we're not going to open a parking lot and say,
And then have
you
the
can't
whole-
get there in the evening because you got all your inspector vehicles there.
Right, and I know the city of, I think North Canton does their city hall parking during the day. It's just the key fob. And so when employees come up, the key fob opens it, but then at 5 o'clock, the
It's open.
gate stays open.
For the whole
that's a great one.
Right, and then it goes back down.
Right, so we gotta figure that out, but I think the objective would be if it's a municipal parking lot for the community, then make it available as much as you can.
Right.
Also recognizing that we do put inspector vehicles over there, but even if, right now, the problem is there's space available during the day, you just can't get to it because you've got a narrow alley going between the two buildings. That'll be improved once we take the house down.
Right.
Once and hopefully we can work with the HPC on it and they'll understand that we've looked into the feasibility of this. And that's what they asked us to do. And we don't have that report ready for them yet, but we will.
So can we conceptually move this ahead to council? I mean, there's still details, but.
Yeah, we can-
I think you could, because there's a reading process. I'll have to get, obviously Jackie's been out, but I'll have to work with her a little on this.
So you're
as
looking
well.
for approval from the finance
I think
committee?
just,
But I'm just trying to think how we would word this, because these numbers aren't what we want. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, we'll
what's the wording there that,
you just make it a resolution to support this?
I would say a motion to support the city building improvements financing.
Whether it's the finance or just completion of the campus
Yeah.
approach, that not just to, phase it, but to renovate the second, the annex, build the parking lot, do those amenities. And these are approximate numbers, but I think they're pretty close.
you got all that?
Which is this report here is pretty much just, I think.
But what we'll need to do is take legislative action. We'll need to amend the budget, and that'll be the bit that makes sense for the city, looking at economics, looking at future cash flow, looking at capital plans that, that we take this on now and get it completed.
We're just trying to figure out how do I put that.
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
let's have her worry about it.
I think it can be as simple as that, the finance
Accepting.
committee votes to recommend moving forward to city council with the comprehensive plan to complete.
As presented
Yeah.
this
Yeah,
evening,
there you go.
and we can attach this.
You want to make a motion?
No.
I guess that's all you can.
All right, so I will make a motion that we recommend to city council moving ahead with the comprehensive plan to complete City Hall campus, which would include the Cohatch improvements, second floor annex updates, City Hall annex renovation as outlined in these reports.
Second.
Excellent. Read the roll.
I'm not going to repeat that, I'll listen. Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Jones?
Yes.
Chairman Hellinger?
Yes.
Excellent.
Good deal.
That's great. Dean.
Yeah, well done,
Yeah,
Dean.
that is.
Yeah.
That's-
That's a little bit of the easier part. I think once we get to staff comments, maybe we'll talk about some more analysis we need to look at, but ready to move on the agenda.
There we go. That's where we are now.
Real quickly, there might be a supplemental coming to city council for completing a bike path on Cheshire Road. We received a grant from Delaware County. This is their first year. They're doing a grant program for trail improvements, and we applied for and received, man, I can't remember the amount. I think it's like close to $50,000. The trail section between the veterinarian on Cheshire and Source Point.
Mhm.
Right now, there's a
Okay,
big gap
yeah.
there.
From Dr. Ballard, boys up to,
Very tight time frame. They want you to spend the money by before the end of the year. We just kind of
Wow.
So it's like,
use it or lose it type thing, or?
yeah. Well, I'm going to call the county and find out if we can get an extension because that's generally
Yeah,
with
that's
projects
very
like that.
It's August.
Yeah, exactly, and especially if you have to get right of way. We have consulted with the owners. They're supportive, which is something that we were waiting for. So that might be coming your way. I don't think there's any more CIP we're working on.
We are. I did want to comment a little bit about, we're looking at retaining basically our municipal advisor who's assisted us with a lot of our bond issues in the past. Reached out to him, had some discussion to talk about the potential with the downtown parking garage, especially the one as it connects to the to the hotel proposal. We looked at that, and obviously parking garages, it's come up before, not in connection with hotels, but it's a discussion with Tom. I really think we should put this together in even a better package than just looking at this sort of stuff, explaining what we can pull together as far as the mechanics with this, how it may look like, what the financial analysis would look like. If we borrowed money, how would it occur? What might it work out with, with the hotel? Because, we've been talking about a parking garage downtown for years, a standalone, city take on all the risk. This one has got, if any of them have an option to maybe make it fly, it's this one, because we've got a known tenant for a third of the spaces, or 2/3 actually when you count the city. And there's probably situations where we could look at that parking garage and work out long-term arrangements with maybe some larger downtown employers to at least get their vehicles out of the other areas to facilitate downtown parking. But want to lay that all out in a better format than me just pulling together summaries. And Dave Conley is the individual, and that's one of the things they do. He does a lot of presentations for school boards. not like the Terra Alt, it's a different issue, but something that we can look at and not just wrap our hands around, but even share with others. And hopefully it's mostly self-explanatory, but also look at, there's a lot of issues, the tax exempt status of it. If we charge spaces, how are we gonna do that? He's got a little bit of experience working with financing, not just parking garages, but even working with finance authorities and different things like that. But we're going to, as best as we can, kind of lay out the issues at play and what that might look like. Doesn't mean we're endorsing this hotel over all the other options out there, but I think there's enough involved just with this, and it's front and center with this, that if we go through this analysis and we come to some conclusion that it's still very difficult for council as a whole to take on the potential, what it might mean to have a parking garage. As I told Tom, I said at some point down the road, the next time somebody wants to suggest building a parking garage in your downtown, we've got some analysis that says even in a scenario where we had known tenants up front, it still was just cost prohibitive. A big factor in that is how much is it going to cost to build. And I know Dave's got access to some information that can even piece together some of that. But the bigger intent is to lay that all out and say, here's where this is at. Here's how this would play out. Here's what it would cost. Here's the risk we would take. Here's the revenue, just not a whole lot, but a lot more expansive than this. What revenue streams might we have? And ultimately, I think there's going to be a difference. We're going to generate some revenue, whether it's all from the hotel and maybe a couple other larger employers. Hopefully we can avoid having to charge people that park there, other than the people that reserve it during certain hours. The rest of the time, we don't have to worry about people collecting money that way. That's a huge issue. But as we look at this, there may be a difference between the revenue stream, the cost to construct, and I think at some point council from a policy standpoint have to wrap their hands around how much is it worth $100,000. I don't know what it would be, but we need to find that out, and it's probably going to be at somewhat of a range. But from a public policy standpoint, as I shared a little earlier, we had this discussion, through many of these meetings about downtown and the streetscape. City's fault because all the businesses are leaving, and you need to invest. And we put $3.6 million.
Look where you are today.
Yeah, what a difference it's made.
It wasn't the only factor, and it was a major factor.
I think there's a lot of things that are not just policy. What we have here, probably a lot more sustainable into the future. What's the spillover? What's the other benefit to that? What does that also mean incrementally to your community as a whole? I mean, we all know, and I'm not saying this hotel versus the other one or whatever else, having a hotel downtown certainly helps keep our downtown vibrant.
You're returning to where you were in the
And
1900s.
the spillover prevent. We put a lot of money. We invested in our downtown. It's helped out, but we need to sustain that, and that helps community. That helps economic development out the industrial park, because businesses come in. They want to look at quality of life issues. If we got a vibrant downtown,
And maybe that's another way to look at it, is that it's not a streetscape project, but it's another investment the city's making.
and not just in your
In the
downtown,
downtown, in our
it's in the
community.
community,
Yeah, it's in our
because it is important. And if you just look at the raw numbers and somebody says, oh, it's $27,000 a space, you can't afford it, it's going to cost you $8 million. Well, I think we need to get beyond that. We need to tie those numbers down. We need to know what we're into, but then it becomes the policy discussion.
So we'll have
Council
that.
can
I think you saw the letter I sent to Bill Jacobson, just indicating we're hiring a financial consultant to assist us. That's what I was referring to. So get that work done. At the same time, we're discussing with this hotel operator over here what their issues are. They're a different set of challenges. They're
Right.
both challenging for different reasons.
Right.
And then, of course, we have in Wesleyan, or the Manos property, so.
One other item just to mention, we had a new community authority meeting. We conducted both of them. Have legislation to reissue those debts, about $9 million in outstanding debt. I think with the infrastructure that's in the ground out there with the surge in the house building in the last couple of years, we're at a point where I think we can look at a long-term financing. Plus the market rates, our short-term rates now are above 2% for a one-year note. 3-4 years ago, it was 0.3%. So that differential between that and the long-term rates are still 3.5%. That gap is narrowing, so the advantages of rolling the notes is dissipating. So, and I think there's enough infrastructure that we'll want to do some type of a bond issue. It may mean that we can issue some bonds that the community authority can issue debt, but I don't think they're going to be able to issue the full amount. maybe $1 million or $2 million of city bonds. But we'll be working through that through the remainder of the year and be presenting something back perhaps before the tail end of the year.
They were trying to get the CIP pulled together, but it's the usual challenges of resources and requests. So.
That it? All right, well, member comments?
Just wanted to kind of tack on to what we've been talking about with parking. With Planet Oasis coming in, solving this parking problem is going to be even more critical because we want to keep people coming downtown. They're going to have some place to park. So it's timely to have these options available to us.
I was thinking about that yesterday when we were stuck in that traffic. I mean, this is just a snippet of what it'd be like all that going on out there in a few years. I mean, everybody's coming from, Toledo way is going to be coming off 23,
Yeah.
coming from, 36 all the way across from Marysville or something like that.
Well, let's just borrow some money and build bypass.
That'd be a pretty big borrow.
Yeah.
Anything else?
That's all I got. All right.
Okay, next meeting date? Will be,
Well,
how long after the CIP?
the CIP gets presented no later than August 15th. We're hoping to get it to you sooner than that, or to council. So it might be sometime in September. I'm not sure yet. We'd have to.
I believe in September we have a workshop scheduled for the CIP.
That's what you're referring to. When was that,
It's the
Elaine? 'Cause
6th.
Kim was just saying something.
And I've
about
got a
that.
conflict.
No, I don't. It was
Could you
the 6th?
Just put a hold on that?
Hold on
everybody?
just a second.
I mean, I've got it on my calendar. I may have gotten there some other way. But
Yeah, I have it on there too.
we probably talked about it at the meeting at some point.
Somebody lane.
Yep, it's September 6th at 6 p.m. That was just something we had set
Right.
a long time ago to get a date on, so if we have
Right.
to.
And I could probably do it starting at 7, but I've got to be with Danny at Franklin University at 5. So that's probably.
That's gonna be kind of close
Yeah,
even then.
yeah, it's going to be tough to be.
September 6th?
Yeah,
It's a Thursday.
Oh, yeah.
We're trying to get a work session in.
For the CIP? Okay,
CIP
okay,
work session
okay.
for everybody, not finance.
Right, right.
So do you need a meeting before that, or
What's that third? Oh, that's late. Is that late?
then the issue is we're losing people with Germany coming up?
I would hold it and we'll just have, Kent can come later, or we just start it later.
I'm,
I'd keep it,
I'm
because
very
you got it
ready,
on there.
so.
It's so hard to get these.
if we start at 6 or 7, it's not, it's just what you want to do.
Well, the meeting, I don't think will take more than an hour, but then I've got to come.
You got travel.
Yeah, from downtown Columbus.
Well, we could start it, maybe compromise start it at 6:30 or something. We just have to figure out what it is. I think it was just holding it, knowing that we would have to have run review session at least.
I mean, that was actually a date we had scheduled.
No, I remember, right? I'm just trying to remember
At a
what,
council, we had set it aside with
Yeah.
everybody, but,
I think it,
I mean, things happen. I mean, that was set probably in February.
I'd keep it.
It's been a while.
you can attend, you just can't attend.
I just wouldn't be able to be here when it started. And if we started at 7, I could be here pretty close to start.
Right.
Yeah.
So if we started at 6:30, you just miss something.
Yeah.
Let's see, but I'd leave it.
Okay.
Just because it's so hard to get
Yeah,
people scheduled.
and then we'll just,
Well, weekends get tough.
we'll hold open our next finance meeting for some time after that then.
Yeah. Yeah, if there's
So-
something comes up and we need to
Yeah.
meet with,
Right, 'cause
convene
we
a
also-
meeting, we'll just,
I think we had another date scheduled too as a secondary in October. I think it was the first Monday.
the first,
The first Monday of October, we were looking at if needed. However,
oh, I've got CIP work session.
Yeah.
Yes.
However-
Yeah.
we will have, our guest here,
Our guests.
our guest.
Oh, this is Baumholder.
that week.
Fall is just unavoidably busy, it seems, so.
And then Christmas is right around the corner.
Budgets.
Thanks
Yeah,
for,
but-
thanks for
yeah,
that.
budget, yeah.
It is what it is.
All right, anything else?
That's all we have.
Let's stick a fork in it. It's 5:53, looks like. That's it.
Yep, so moved.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. How was your vacation?
Well,